Welcome to episode 5 of the Baseball Odds Watch podcast. I'm your host, Eddie. We've got a bunch going on this week. The NL, the Wild Wild West, NL West is now undecided. The Padres and the D-backs are as hot as a pistol. We did some Instagram polls with our Instagram audience. Shout out to anybody joining on the Instagram Live, which had some good results. But first, we got to talk about the World Series odds as we always do. But there have been some changes in the favorites for the World Series. The top 4 really are still pretty much the same. The Dodgers and, of course, being the favorites. It's a lot less than it was before. The Phillies behind them, the Yankees behind the Phillies, and the Orioles. The 5 spot, the 5th favorites are now the Houston Astros. The 6th favorites are now the Minnesota Twins. And then are the Atlanta Braves. And then are the Cleveland Guardians, who happen to be one of the best teams in baseball, by the way. So Vegas is not super confident in the Guardians, in what they can do in October, but they have odds to win it, and they are in the top 10 at 9. And then it's the Padres, and that rounds out the top 10. Then it's the D-backs, and then it's the Brewers. So finally we got an NL Central team, but they're still not cracking the top 10. I think actually they're even worse favorites now than they were a week ago. So that's a little unfortunate for the Brewers. You know, I like them. I think that that's their division to lose. So we'll move on from that. I don't see really much else surprising in the World Series odds. Beyond that, I mean, the Mariners are behind the Brewers at 13th favorites, which is maybe the next surprising thing, but not really. So let's go to these poll results. So if you follow on Instagram, you saw that I posted some polls on my story for some of the awards that'll be coming up this off season. So we'll start with the first one, which was National League Rookie of the Year, which looks like it's coming down to Paul Skeens and Jackson Merrill. Obviously, there's Jackson Chourio out there. There's Shota Imanaga and what he's been able to do. He's been great, I think. But I think of the rookies in the National League, the obvious breakouts are Paul Skeens and Jackson Merrill. The seasons they're putting together for their teams and what they've been able to do for their teams is where it kind of differentiates. You gave Paul Skeens 72% of the vote for National League Rookie of the Year. Jackson Merrill, 22%, and then the others took 6%. I'm not mad at those results at all. I think the only thing to consider here is that Paul Skeens is a pitcher, which shouldn't weigh so heavy. However, I do think that makes Paul Skeens essentially one bad performance away from no longer being the Rookie of the Year. That's kind of my take on it, because he's a starting pitcher. He only plays once every 5 games. So if he has a bad outing, it can really change this. Where Jackson Merrill, I mean, if he goes 0 for 4, 0 for 5, he can come back tomorrow and go 3 for 4, hit a home run, drive in some RBIs, maybe hit a walk-off, and all of a sudden he's back up there. So that's my take on that one. AL Rookie of the Year, Colton Cowser, between Colton Cowser and Luis Gil. Again, besides that it came down to these two, I think when you make the comparison, National League rookies versus AL rookies, it's not as close. I think National League rookies really got it. Colton Cowser, 59%. Luis Gil, you guys gave him 31%, and then the other got 10%. Again, another one that I'm not mad at. And Luis Gil's kind of an example of what I just said about Paul Skeens, where Luis Gil had a couple of outings that were not very good. And all of a sudden, everyone's giving this Rookie of the Year award to Colton Cowser, who's sure he's good, but he's not great. I mean, he may not be the best rookie on his team right now. Granted, he's been here all year. Jackson Holiday might have something to say about that if he can stay consistent through the rest of the year, but obviously he's not going to qualify. So I'm okay with Colton Cowser as Rookie of the Year. Again, him being an offensive, defensive player versus being a pitcher gives him an advantage. Next was if Aaron Judge is going to win the AL MVP, because again, this is another award that he's kind of just running away with versus the rest of the league. I mean, if you got to get a replacement, right? If you got to vote for someone else, who do you look at? Juan Soto, maybe his teammate? Maybe Anthony Santander? 72% of you said yes, Aaron Judge is the American League MVP. The 38% of you that said no, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to know who you would put in his stead, because I can't look around the league and see anybody that's coming in even close to the season that Aaron Judge has been able to put together this year. If Aaron Judge was out for the season, are the Yankees anywhere? I'd say maybe an Anthony Santander gets a few votes. Maybe, well, for sure, Bobby Witt Jr. will get a few votes because he's a 5-tool guy. But I don't think it's even close to what Aaron Judge. Someone just said Bobby Witt Jr. I don't even think it's close though to what Aaron Judge has been able to do. So I think that award is kind of a lock at this point, unless God forbid something really bad happens, and then Bobby Witt Jr. goes on a tear, or Bobby Witt Jr. just goes on an insane tear. The next one was Ohtani. Is he going to win MVP in the National League? 83% yes, 17% no. I think this is the year. It's looking like and shaping up to be the year that we have a DH that was solely DH all season for the first time win MVP. It's never happened. Someone said in a DM that someone did it in the 70s, and I went and looked, and that person happened to play some right field that year. So Ohtani's not doing anything but DHing, and what he's been able to do DHing to put himself not only in the conversation to win MVP, but to be the clear front runner to win MVP. Ketel Marte would be my second choice. Behind him, maybe Marcell Ozuna. But again, another one, I just don't think anyone's really close to second. That second, or maybe that second place, I should say, isn't really close to that favorite. So Ohtani MVP, 83%. That's huge. Cy Young is where it got a little iffy. AL Cy Young, Tarek Skubal got 52% of the vote. So the other half of you just don't think it's going to be him, because 32% said Corbin Burns, and then the other 16% of you just said other. So, I mean, I'm not sure who those others would even be. But I would just say Skubal just kind of by default. I think he's had the better season of all pitchers, but I wouldn't say that this is one of those awards that's necessarily decided all the way through. You know, I don't think that this is an award that we can give it out now based on this poll or what we think, because I think a lot can change within the next month and a half of baseball. NL Cy Young is kind of the same thing. I think it's coming down to Chris Sale and Zach Wheeler. So I put those two guys in the poll, and then everyone else just fell under the other. Sale got 53% of the vote, Wheeler 36%, and then the other got the remaining 12%. So again, Chris Sale's having a great year for a team that's not having so great a year. You could look at his teammate Reynaldo Lopez. I don't know why he's not in that conversation, but he's not. maybe maybe they're just not he's qualified late in the season, so they're not giving Ronaldo Lopez a lot of credit there. Zach Wheeler's had a few speed bumps this season. Yes, Bobby Witt Jr. would have to have a lot go right to qualify for that MVP spot against Judge, is what one of my commenters threw in there. And he threw in a lot of numbers that, let's see, 100 runs, 100 RBIs, 30 Royals playoffs, and Judge not getting to 55 home runs. Yeah, I can agree to that. And I don't think that, I mean, it's possible that Judge doesn't get to a higher home run total. I think he's going to see a lot of walks, especially which isn't going to be good for the Yankees, but we'll talk about that a little more in depth when we get to the Yankees. Let's go to the NL West, and let's talk NL West first, because this division, the landscape of the NL West has changed sort of dramatically as this season has progressed. All year long, we were willing to call this division for the Dodgers. Now, the Dodgers are still in first place in the NL West. Dodgers are still the favorites at minus 650 to win the National League West. However, the Dodgers are not a steady ship right now, if you ask me. I see Mookie Betts comes back from injury and immediately goes to right field. Miguel Rojas takes over as shortstop, and Ahmed Rosario gets DFA'd. And this is all in August after the trade deadline. I see a team that in the middle of August is still figuring themselves out a little bit. Sure, fine. The record, the numbers, maybe don't say that as much, but remember, folks, when it comes to October, you've got to know who you are to beat a team 3 times or 4 times in a row. So then you look at the Padres, plus 800 to win the division. They're only 3.5 games back in that division, and they're red hot. They're 18-4 since the All-Star breaks. 18-4 since the All-Star break. They hold the second to last series against the Dodgers. So that division can come down to that series. They're 3.5 back from the Dodgers. The D-backs plus 1,000 to win the division. They're 9-1 in their last 10 games. The offense is on fire. The lineup is insanely scary again. They look exactly like they did last season when they won the National League pennant. 3.5 games as well back from the Dodgers. Ketel Marte's day-to-day right now. He got that injury, that ankle roll, the ankle sprain that they're calling it. But this division is no longer decided in my eyes. I don't agree with minus 650 favorites for the Dodgers at all. Especially when they've got to play the Padres again before the season ends. I don't agree with that one bit. The Padres are hot. The D-backs are hot. The Dodgers are still kind of figuring things out in the middle of August. So even if they do win the division and they're a higher seed in the playoffs, they might get eliminated if you don't know who's playing where by this point in the season. One thing that the Braves did right last year, that Brian Snitker did right, and maybe it cost them in the end because guys were tired. Everyone on that roster, everyone in that lineup knew exactly where they were going to be tomorrow. They knew exactly where they were going to be tonight. They knew exactly where they were going to be the next day. The only one that's been steady in that lineup in the same place has been the DH because he has no other choice. This West Division is by no means decided, and I think Vegas should be taking note of that. And then there's the Giants in the NL West. Minus 1,200 to not make the playoffs. They're 3.5 games back from the wild card. They can still numerically, mathematically make it, but If they don't, they're going to regret having not sold Snell when they had the chance to at this deadline. Because you won't get anything for him. All signs are pointing to that he's going to opt out. I mean, if he stays, great. But if not, you're going to regret it if you're the Giants. So let's move on to the National League Central. Now, this is a division that's decided. This is a division that I don't think much is going to change within a month and a half. The Brewers are minus 1,700 favorites to win the National League Central. They're the highest favorites to win any division in baseball right now. That changed. Minus 1,700 is huge. And when you look at the rest of the NL Central, said it coming into the season that the rest of those teams were going to have to beat up on each other, and it was going to be advantageous to whoever was at the top. And it's very advantageous to the Brewers, who are first place by 7.5 games in that division. I think that's also the highest gap between a first and second place team in any division it is. So they're doing just fine with the moves they made. No more Corbin Burns, no more Craig Counsell as their manager. Their young talent, Bryce Terang, Jackson Chourio, it's worked out for them. So they're kind of laughing at the rest of the league right now because it looks like they're getting the last laugh in all the moves they made, in the Corbin Burns trade specifically, because, hey, they're still in it and they're not fighting to keep their division. They have their division. Meanwhile, the Cardinals were in second place. I have a lot to say about the Cardinals right now. 3.5 back from the wild card, or the St. Louis Cardinals. Minus 700 odds, favorites to not make the playoffs. Plus 500 underdogs to make the playoffs. If the Cardinals can't find their way into the playoffs for the second year in a row, it might be time to blow up this team. Goldschmidt is a free agent after this year. Nolan Arenado, you've got him through 2027, but he's not the same guy. Wilson Contreras, you have him through 2028, but he has shown he's not the same player that he was in Chicago when you used to have to play against him. That's a lot of contract control time on expensive contracts. So it's difficult to blow up, sure. So maybe that's not the answer if you don't make it. Maybe the answer is who's leading your dugout, who's scratching in your lineups. Maybe you've got to get rid of Oliver Marmol at the end of this season and get a new face at the helm, someone else at the wheel. Because if you're a Cardinals fan, this should be unacceptable. You were in last place in the division last year, and now you're barely in the wild card race. You're not winning a lot of games, you're not losing a bunch, but you're not the team as advertised. You're not performing as advertised. So the changes have to be made. Do you want to wait another year of Arenado's contract, of Contreras' contract, when that trade value just continues to go down and down and down? Are you hoping for a miracle next year? Are you going to go after Goldschmidt again? Are you going to try to make him your first baseman again? There are a lot of questions for the St. Louis Cardinals that they don't have the answers to, and they need to start looking for them. You should have started looking for them at this deadline. You didn't. Fine. Winter meetings, you've got to make a lot of moves because you're putting a lot of money into this team and you're not getting a lot of results. The Reds, on the other hand, 4.5 games back, minus 4,000 odds to not make it. I mean, they're probably not going to make it. Barring an insane run, they're most likely out of it. However, the difference is the Reds are young. Only guy that's leaving them anytime soon, I believe, is Jonathan India after this season. Which, fine. You've got Noelvi Marte. You've got his replacement already. You're ready to go. Spencer Steer's not going anywhere. Ellie De La Cruz isn't going anywhere. A lot of young talent. Reese Hines. You're not playing pressure baseball. The Cubs, 5.5 back. I mean, they made the moves. They're playing for next year at this point, and they know it, but they've got the team to do it next year. And then there's the Pirates, who I'm very disappointed in because I got really excited about the Pittsburgh Pirates a couple of weeks ago. They looked really fun, really exciting. And then they lost 9 straight games. They've pretty much put themselves out of it. 7 back from a wild card spot. Minus 1,500, or no, I'm sorry, minus 15,000 favorites to not make the playoffs. I don't know what happened. Maybe you made all the wrong decisions at the deadline, but you were right there. You were right there. You were a couple of games back from a wild card spot, and now the season has kind of ended early for you guys. But who knows? Mathematically, they're still in it. Let's go to the NL East. To another division that's pretty much decided, as we've been saying for weeks now, which is the Philadelphia Phillies. I mean, look, they're not doing great, right? We know this. Their recent record isn't the prettiest. They're 4-6 in their last 10, hitting some speed bumps along the way, but the rest of the NL East isn't that good either. So it's only a matter of time before they clinch this division. So you just got to wait it out with them. They're still a really good team, and, they're pretty far up in their division. Let's see, at 6 games above the Braves, who are the next best team in the NL East. So, fine, if they're letting their foot off the gas, hopefully they don't live to regret it. But if they are, they are. I mean, you want to save your guys for October. That's when you need them to perform. So, and the amount of times like the big stars have been on the injured list for the Phillies this season, it's all right. I get it. The Braves, they fell out of the wild card spot this past week, but they're back in it. They're back to holding on to that very last wild card spot. And they're up on the Mets by 2 games. And it's because the Mets are in a bit of a downward trajectory lately, too. But this has been the Mets season. They've been up, down, up, down, up, down. The Braves, they're minus 240 still to make the playoffs. The Mets are minus 300 to not make the playoffs. So Vegas thinks it's going to be the Braves. I still don't. I mean, if they do, great, but they won't do much in October with the team that they have. Granted, anything can happen. Brian Snitker's been there. Matt Olson has been there. They still got a lot of guys that have been there, but they don't have the key parts of their team. So what happens once you get past Chris Sale? Maybe Ronaldo Lopez can do something, but it's going to be his first postseason, so let's see. The Mets, though, they were there. You got beat up on by the Seattle Mariners. You lost to the Oakland A's. You threw Paul Blackburn against his old team, and he got shelled. Austin Adams, who you DFA'd, got to scream at you on your mound. And the Mets have a tough schedule. They're ending their season. Their last 3 seasons of the series last 3 seasons, 3 series of the season for the Mets are against the Phillies, the Braves, and the Brewers. So if they can find a way to stay in it and then win those series, maybe they find themselves playing in October instead of the Braves. Let's jump to the American League and let's go out east. The Yankees, odds versus standings, favorites and in first place. But again, those AL East odds, minus 180 for the Yankees as favorites. They're only a half game up right now on the Orioles. Bad news for them. Jazz Chisholm's injured. They don't know how long it's going to be yet. They haven't said. It's a UCL injury. We've seen a lot of those, but his arm got caught during a slide and didn't look good. He had to come out of the game. So they're hoping that their new third baseman is only gone for a little bit. Meanwhile, the Orioles, last 10 games, they're 5-5. They're plus 150 to win this division. I still think they do it. Half a game back, as we said, and Anthony Santander, like I mentioned him earlier, he should be in the MVP race, if you ask me. I mean, obviously, Judge is going to win it, but wow, what a season he's putting together. And he's hot right now. When they need him the most, he's hot. And if he can carry this into October, Baltimore is maybe not a first-round exit like they were last season when they won the division and then just got beat up right away. Boston, moving on to them. And the AL wild card, right? Because we know that one of those spots is going to go to whoever doesn't win the AL East between the Yankees and the Orioles, right? And then that's the top wild card spot. So those two teams right now, the Yankees and Orioles, are very likely going to be in the playoffs. The Minnesota Twins hold the second one. The Royals hold the third one. And then the Boston Red Sox are a game back. They took 2 out of 3 last week from the Royals. Then they got swept by the Astros. So far, they've won 2 out of 3 from the Rangers. They're minus 205 to miss the playoffs. Plus 154. 1 game back from the Royals in that wild card spot. So let's jump to the Central and the Royals, who lost that series to the Red Sox. Now they're losing a series to the Twins. They're playing right now. I'll check on the score in a second. It's in a commercial break, but they're minus 128 and minus 104 to make and not make the playoffs. So Vegas has no idea, but they're saying, hey, it could go either way, and I agree. And when you look at the odds versus the standings for the Central, I mean, it gets even more fun. Because now this division is no longer decided, right? And I always said this was a division that the Twins could win. I picked them to win this division earlier this season. The Guardians are minus 203. Or I'm sorry, minus 280 now. Live odds have just changed. And I'm sure that's having to do with the game going on the TV behind me between the Twins and Royals. I believe the Royals are up in that game. The Guardians minus 280 to win this division. The Twins plus 290 to win that division at 3.5 currently. Again, before this game behind me ends, 3.5 games back in that division and holding on to that second wild card spot, as we said. Now, the thing about this division, 3.5 games separate them currently. They have a 4-game series against each other in the middle of September. Another division that will probably get decided toward the end of September, and that mid-September series being one that does big things, goes really big toward deciding that. Right? Because I mean, granted, it's going to depend on really how the Twins end up playing the rest of their games up until they play against the Guardians, right? If they go on a insane losing streak, then that's it. That's going to be the Guardians division, and that's that. That 4-game series may not make much of a difference. But if the Twins can be healthy in that series, right? They just lost Byron Buxton for a little bit. I mean, they got to stay healthy. Their core has to stay healthy because their core, when healthy, is scary. We've talked about Buxton. We've talked about Carlos Correa. We've talked about Royce Lewis. When all three of those guys are healthy, what that lineup looks like and how scary it is to play against the Twins. But whenever that happens, or just knowing that that's a possibility, you need other guys to be good or to get hot now into October, now through September and going into October. Matt Wallner might be getting hot right now. He had to do a stint in AAA and now he came back and he looks like a new man. Ryan Jeffers, the catcher. I mean, you need somebody else to fill in that gap. Maybe it's Jose Miranda. Somebody's got to get hot because the Guardians, even when they're not doing good, they play very well. Jhonkensy Noel is a scary power bat right now. You cannot make a mistake against Father Christmas, as they're calling him. You can't make a mistake against Jhonkensy Noel because he's going to put it into the seats. You can't make a mistake against Josh Naylor the season that he's having because he's going to put it into the seats. Steven Kwan is playing like he's Ichiro in his prime, and Jose Ramirez is Jose Ramirez. He can do it all. Hit, steal, switch hit, play third base. He's the guy. They put money into the right guy in Cleveland, and so the Twins just have to get right. They have to be healthy, and you have to have some other guys step up the way that the Guardians have had guys step up all season, because if not, you're going to be banking on a wild card in a volatile league, and you might not make it. You might be on the outside looking in come October. And then there's the Tigers and White Sox, who are pretty much out of it. Actually, in reality, the White Sox are the first team to be completely eliminated mathematically from winning their division. So I'm sure very shortly they will be completely eliminated from playoff contention. But they did win a game, and they did fire Pedro Grifol, which is big. You know, I know we don't want to talk about the White Sox in a good way because it's kind of fun not to, right? But give credit to that office. Yep, they traded everyone away, and now they got rid of the manager. They've got Grady Sizemore at the helm the rest of the way. Maybe this can be like Antonio Pierce and the Raiders last football season, where he took over midway and then won the respect of the locker room and gets a job. Who knows? But he won. He came in and won a game against the Yankees. So that's big. Lastly, we move on to the AL West, the Wild West. I mean, both of those West divisions, man, are those divisions fun? It must be a really fun time to be out west in California and in those areas and be a baseball fan, because the AL West isn't decided either. The Astros, boy, what the Astros have been able to put together over the last couple of months from where they were, where we thought they might be sellers. And we thought Bregman on a contract year was going to be in a different uniform, playing third base somewhere else. And now, not only is he still in Houston, he's on fire. He's got 4 straight games today. Might end, but he, coming into today, has 4 straight games with a home run. Minus 280 are the Astros to win the AL West. The Mariners, the thing about them is they've put themselves in a really bad spot by giving up that AL West lead, because they're a game and a half behind the Mariners behind the Astros in the AL West, but they're 2 games back from the wild card. They're not in the wild card right now. So you need to win the division if you're the Mariners to make the playoffs. Right now, they're plus 195 to win the division, minus 135 to not make the playoffs at all, plus 104 to make the playoffs. It's all they're doing. All they're doing. They couldn't hit up until a few days ago, right? When they went and they played against the Mets and they put up 22 runs on them on a weekend series. They looked like the team that they traded for at the deadline. But it's going to come down to the last series of the season, the second last series of the season for both of these teams when they play each other. I think that division will be decided in that series. That'll be another one of these divisions that gets decided toward the end of the season. They're going to need a win. Both of these teams are going to need that series big because we know they're not a wild card team right now. And I don't think that changes. I don't think that the AL West produces a wild card team. I think we get 1, maybe 2 from the AL East, 1, maybe 2 from the AL Central, and then that's it. We don't get a wild card team from the West. So the Mariners take that momentum that you had with your bats playing against the Mets, and you have to make a run. You have to keep hitting. Your pitching is great. Your pitching is excellent. Your pitching is the best in the league. No exaggeration. But you got to hit because those Astros are not giving up that lead. And if they do, you're going to have to take it directly from them. They're not going to lose games going forward, especially not against teams that they should beat. The Astros have done this many times. 7 straight years they've held that division. They're not going anywhere. So, that's how the AL West looks. It's going to be an exciting September, that's for sure. My final thoughts for this week's podcast. There's not going to be a podcast episode next week. I will be away for my wedding in the Dominican Republic. I am Dominican. Both my parents and my wife's mother were born there, and I was born here in New York. Like any Dominican and like anyone else who's a fan of baseball, I love seeing my people play the game, especially in the World Baseball Classic. I love cheering for the Dominican national team in international competition with the best from every other country there. Now, earlier this year, MLB released the locations for the 2026 World Baseball Classic. Dominicans make up over 10% of MLB players, which is the second most behind the US, who have 71%. There have only been 3 countries to win a World Baseball Classic: Japan, the US, and the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic is the only country that has won a championship and has yet to host any part of the World Baseball Classic games. Besides Cuba, the Dominican Republic is the only country to have played in a WBC championship game and not have been able to host any part of the World Baseball Classic. MLB, WBC, that's unacceptable. In spring training, the Red Sox and Rays played in Santo Domingo's Estadio Quisqueya, so obviously MLB caliber games can be played there. In baseball media, you have A-Rod and Big Papi on Fox, Pedro Martinez on TBS, Carlos Pena on the MLB Network, Joe's McFly, who's Dominican, is one of the biggest names in the baseball social media world. The Dominican Republic is even hosting the FIFA Under 17 Women's World Cup qualifiers. So FIFA trusts the country's infrastructure, but baseball is the Dominican Republic's biggest sport, not soccer. The country is synonymous with some of the biggest names ever to play baseball, especially right now. So why can't they host any part of the World Baseball Classic? I'm not saying boycott or do anything weird, but I do think this is unacceptable on the part of MLB, and it does send a message to Dominicans that we can be in every aspect of the game except for hosts of international play. Sure, maybe I'm a little biased, but I think if any country deserves to be hosting international baseball games, it's the Dominican Republic. Big series that are coming up this weekend. There aren't too many, admittedly. I wish there were more, but the Red Sox, who are trying to get into that wild card spot, they're playing against the Baltimore Orioles in Baltimore. The Guardians, best team in the AL Central, are playing against the best team in the NL Central, the Milwaukee Brewers. The Dodgers play against the Cardinals, which we know what the Cardinals are trying to do, maybe make a run for that wild card spot, but let's see what happens. And other than that, all the contending teams are playing against pretty much non-contending teams. So that's this week's episode. Again, no episode next week because I will be away. And again, I will also be posting very soon a GoFundMe to take Baseball Odds Watch to the Tokyo series between the Dodgers and Cubs in March. And I'm hoping that you guys can be gracious enough to help send Baseball Odds Watch to Tokyo to take in the Tokyo opening series between the Cubs and Dodgers. Thank you all for joining and listening. Thank you to everyone who joined the live, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Goodbye, everybody.